We are starting a new study this morning. We're going to be looking at, actually, let me just give a little bit of an explanation. Because we do not have a teacher for the teen class, I'm doing something that can be a subject that the teens could be present for, and of great interest. And it is, we're going to be following loosely this book. It's a new book from Apologetics Press, written by Jeff Miller. It's called Flooded, and it is about Noah's flood and the facts of the flood. We're going to be covering that, and also that of the effects it has had on this earth. You don't have to have a literal ark in the mountains of Ararat, finding the remains of an ark in the mountains of Ararat to know there was a flood. Matter of fact, you would be very unwise to say there never was, to say that the earth was never covered in water, because the evidence is everywhere that the earth was covered in water by something at some time. Everyone will agree with that, because there are too many places, high altitude places, that show rocks that have been laid down by water and mass graveyards of animals buried in those rocks. What's now rock was sediment at one time. And there are also places such as the Valley of the Whales, and that is whales as in the animal, the large animal whales, and that happens to be in Egypt, and it's in the Sahara Desert. It is a valley that is full of not just whale bones, but all kinds of sea creatures left there. And how did they get into the desert? How did they get there? They had to have been deposited there, swimming by water, and the water disappeared. They had to have, and it had to have been deep enough for them and long enough for them to get there. And some of the creatures there would have to have enough time to get there. But before we get into that, what we want to do first is to talk about the world prior to the flood. I think we need to do that. We need to talk about that. And so we're going to begin in Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 3, we have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And their sin enters into the world. They disobey God. Sin enters into the world, and they are sent out of the Garden of Eden, and they can never return. No one can ever return. And life is going to be different for them. And how long were they in the garden? There's no way to know how long they were in the garden. We can't know that. But I would just venture to say it wasn't very long at all. Was it years? I doubt it. Was it a year? I doubt that too. I doubt they were in the garden very long. It's not as though Satan's just going to wait around before he does something wicked. He goes, I think he works pretty quick in this. Nevertheless, we are going to be looking here in Genesis chapter 4, where they have been sent out of the garden and the world population is going to begin. And we start, let's just look at chapter 3, verse 20 first. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And I want to bring that out because there are people that can get confused, and the people that can begin to wonder about where did all the people come, and where did everybody come from. We only came from one set of parents, Adam and Eve. That's it. There was no multitude of people that were created like Adam and Eve to make the population of the earth. It is only Adam and Eve, and she is the mother of all the living. She's the mother of everyone. And we need to know, also realize that Moses is writing this. Moses is writing this centuries after the fact. He's writing this inspired by God and writing what occurred and why things are the way they are. And we begin in chapter 4, verse 1. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Is this Adam and Eve's firstborn? I don't know. Could it be? Yes. Could he be number 10? Yeah, he could be number 10. We don't know if he was the firstborn or if he was down the line. We don't know. Cain and Abel are not listed. They're not put here because they are child number 1 and child number 2. Though it could be that they are. It could be that they are. But they are listed because of what occurs. Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. How many? That would be that second generation. Adam and Eve are the first generation. That second generation coming in, how many are there? We don't know. We don't know how many children they actually had. They would have been the healthiest people possible, Adam and Eve. They would have had a lifespan that would have been exceptionally long, and we'll get to that in time. And childbearing years, for us today, those childbearing years really are a much shorter span of time than in those days. When you have people living in excess of 900 years, it's not as though they retired at 65 and then lived those hundreds of years after that. At 65, they would be a mere teenager. I mean, as far as where they are in their lifespan. Now, they would have matured the same rate as us, but there's a difference between maturing and aging. There's a big difference. That the gestation period for a baby would have been the same. Learning how to walk would have been the same period of expected time. Same thing for learning to talk. Same thing for all these other things of becoming that of teenagers, preteens and teenagers, and then into young adults. That would have taken the same amount of time back then as it does today. But the aging process after, when you're talking about their entire lifespan, is very different back then because the world was different back then. Now, we'll discuss that in time more fully. But we see where a son is born and his name is Cain. Then, verse 2, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So we have their occupations, what they're doing. Abel was a shepherd. So domesticated sheep was all the way back then. And there needs to be said concerning domesticated sheep. Domesticated sheep are they're one of those animals that are entirely helpless without man. Entirely. There are wild sheep, yeah, there are, living in the mountains and whatnot. But he is keeping domesticated sheep. And already domesticated animals are around that they can domesticate animals. And so this is just the second generation. Abel is a keeper of sheep. Cain is a tiller of the ground. So he's your basic farmer. is what he is. They've got to eat. And here we are, second generation. They are not, note, they're not hunters and gatherers. They're not scavengers. They're not, if he's a keeper of sheep, that means they're not with the doing the slash and burn. And I'll discuss what those mean. A hunter and gatherer, there are people living today who are, in fact, hunters and gatherers. That's what they do. It's a very, very primitive way of life, but they live in areas of the world where they can do that. They live in areas of the world where they have a steady supply of living in a rainforest, living in a place where there is an abundance of plant life, fruits and wild things growing that are edible. And instead of farming, it's a matter of following the various things growing in the forest. And so in tropical places, you have no telling how many things providing fruit right now and providing it all year round. Other things only turn out, once a year. That's what they do. That's their cycle. But other things just are constantly churning out. And so there's no need to farm if you can survive by hunting and gathering. But with hunting and gathering, it does mean that you're going to have to be more mobile. Now, why am I bringing this out? At this point in time, that's not what they're doing. Or at least they don't have to do that. They don't have to do it at all. You have someone who's tilling the ground. You have someone who's a shepherd. And that means you have settlements, places where you don't have to keep moving, steadily moving. Slash and burn is typically what's done in jungly areas, rainforest areas, and it is going into an area, chopping everything down, burning it, and then raising a crop, and it's poor soil in there to begin with. And so really you're doing good to get maybe a couple of crops out of it, and then you've got to move on, go to a different place, do the same process. They're not doing that either. They're not doing that. And I am saying this because it is popular fiction that we all came from the most primitive sort of beginnings, and we didn't. We didn't come from the most primitive sort of beginnings. That is, of coming from some sort of ape ancestor and slowly learning that we can use a stick as a tool, and slowly living in the most primitive sort of way. We didn't. Or that somehow in our beginnings it was the worship of everything around us, and it wasn't. We started off knowing there was one God, and either worshiping Him or not. And as we're going to see just in the text in chapter 4, that it didn't take long before we have those that they're worshiping Jehovah, but they're not worshiping Him correctly. That would be Cain. They've been instructed as to what to do. All right, so we have Cain, we have Abel. Verse 3, and in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of fruit of the ground to the Lord. Okay, so in the process of time, he grew up. In the process of time, he became his own, he's an adult now, and he's responsible for making the sacrifices. As a child, he wouldn't be responsible for doing that, but now that he's a man, he is responsible for that, and he is doing what? He's offering the fruit of the ground to Jehovah. That's his focus. That's who he's worshiping. But they have been told how to worship God. They've been told how to do it. Because we're going to see. It's obvious they've been told. Because we see verse 4. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry and his countenance fell. All right, so there is the correct way of worship, and there is the incorrect. Every other way is not correct. Every other way is wrong. So we have Abel. He is worshiping God properly. It is by animal sacrifice. Whatever Cain is offering is just from the ground, whatever it was, and we don't know what that was. It's just whatever he was growing, that's what he was offering, and God did not respect it because it says, verse 5, but he, that is God, did not respect Cain and his offering. Now, would God have it a mystery as to how he's to be worshipped? No, he wouldn't. But we see this. Verse 6, so the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? What's the implication there? The implication is Cain knew how to do well. He had already been instructed how to do this and what to do. He had been, if you do well, will you not be accepted? God doesn't have to tell him what well is, because Cain already knows, he just refuses. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Sin lies at the door. And here is the implication. But you should rule over it means it's not going to be long. It's going to be ruling over you. It's not going to be long. You should rule over it. Okay, we're in Genesis chapter 4, and now in verse 8. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And this is why Cain and Abel are in the biblical text. Not because they are child 1 and child 2, which it could be the case. It doesn't say. Cain and Abel are here because of what happens here. There are plenty of children that Adam and Eve had. We do not know their names at all. They are not given to us. They're not given to us in order. They're not given to us by name, but we know that they had sons and daughters. We know that. All right. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? So that sounds suspicious right there. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Verse 10, and he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. There is vengeance, there's justice that is demanded. Now, Cain realizes his situation, and we're not going to take a lot of time in studying Cain, but in the study of those like Cain, we can see the psychology that is there, if we're allowed to call it that. We can see the mode that he goes into, that he switches into, and that of caring more about himself than he did, and his own welfare than he did for his brothers. He's worried that others will kill him, but not so much that he just killed his brother. All right, what about his brother? Did his brother deserve to die? Well, no, he didn't. But let's continue on. There is justice demanded. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. All right. Is that not what punishment is supposed to be? Punishment is meant to punish. It's not meant to be easy. If it were easy, then it would be meaningless. The law would have no teeth. If the law has teeth and the teeth are sharp, then there is a fear of the law, breaking it, and a fear of the lawgiver, God. All right, it's more than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. Now, what is he saying here? He's saying there's a population on the earth. He's not talking about mom and dad. He's not talking about Adam and Eve. Anyone who finds me, like if my dad finds me, he kills me, or if my mom finds me, she'll kill me. He's not talking about that. He's saying anybody who finds me will kill me. Which means he's got brothers and probably nephews. He wouldn't have any cousins. The second generation couldn't have cousins. But there would be a population on the earth already when he says this. When he says this, anyone who finds me will kill me. And verse 15, and the Lord said to him, therefore whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. Okay, now, here is a thing concerning capital punishment, because we need to take a little bit of time here. We are setting things up. Actually, the Bible is setting things up to let us know the condition of the world prior to the flood. Our beginnings, actually. Where we came from and the things that occurred prior to the flood. And the generations there. And we can also know how many years it is from the creation to the flood. We can know exactly how many years it was. If I'm remembering correctly, it's 1,656 years from creation to the flood. We can know that because the text tells us that. And in this, we see concerning capital punishment that God does not kill Cain, nor will he allow anyone else to kill Cain. Why would he do that? We will call it the judge's prerogative. A judge can decide capital punishment, this person should die, or leniency. And this is leniency because he's going to allow Cain to live. Cain's going to have children. He's going to allow Cain to live. And this is the prerogative of the judge. The judge has that right. He's got that right. And most certainly, God as judge has that right. Now, when we get later going into Genesis 9, Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, we have a law concerning capital punishment of murder. If you murder someone, that is killing an innocent person. If you murder someone, then there is to be capital punishment. You have lost your privilege to live. But still, there's the judge's prerogative in this, and the judge says, yes, he should live. Now, verse 16, here we get into the genealogy that follows on Cain's line and then getting into Seth. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. Now, these are not primitive people. They're not primitive. Sure, they are starting from square one. They are starting from square one. But they are not nomadic to begin with. Not nomadic. You don't build a city and be a nomad. You don't do it. There's no point in it. You would live in a tent, or you would live in whatever some makeshift lean-to, but you don't build a city. here we are, second generation, and Cain builds a city. That means there's got to be a population. You can't have a city of 3. There's got to be a population going on. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methushael, and Methushael begot Lamech. Now, here we are. Lamech is now seventh generation. Lamech is 7th generation. Adam and Eve, 1st generation. Now Lamech is 7th generation. And in this 7th generation, everyone who has not been killed one way or another is still alive. Adam and Eve are still alive at this point. Adam and Eve are still there because they're going to have another son. They're still having children. Then Lamech took for himself, and look at what happens in the 7th generation. Lamech took for himself 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. Here's the beginning of polygamy. Polygamy begins here as one of the children of Cain, one of the descendants of Cain. He is the first polygamist. And Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So here are those who do live in tents. Here are those who are more nomadic. Having livestock means that you are going to be among the pastures and the grazing grounds and moving from one place to another. They will be nomadic. They will be. But others are not. Others are not nomadic. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and flute. So here we have the beginnings of musical instruments. Now there would have already been singing. That comes as a natural. That's a natural. That's just going to happen. But here is someone who discovers, I can make sounds, beautiful sounds, out of these things that I've discovered. You take a reed and put some holes in it, and you can now make a noise. Or you tighten up some strings, whatever those strings happen to be. Used to be for violins, I do believe, catgut. But you take these strings, and you can, according to how long they are or how tight they are, you can produce different tones. They're not stupid people. They are brilliant. They're brilliant. Think, you were born in a world full of houses and full of cities. You did not build the first city. They did. You were born in a world full of music, centuries of it. They weren't. They weren't. And now we're coming to another. Verse 22. And as for Zillah, she also bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. Okay? What is that? Here is, and truly, I would be at a loss of go to extract iron. I wouldn't know what it looks like in the ground. It's not as though there are iron ingots lying around everywhere. They're not. You've got to extract it out of the ground one way or other. Either it's embedded in rock or it's somewhere in the ground. You've got to be able to then find it and then separate it. There is a smelting that is involved, and also there is a purifying that is involved. And he is a craftsman in bronze and iron. Now, iron is an element. That's an element. Bronze, however, is not. Bronze is In fact, it's a mix of two things, of tin and copper, I do believe. So you have to have tin and copper and then put them together and they form bronze. So here is this extracting of ore from the ground and being able to smelt it, purify it, and make. Now, what's he doing with iron and bronze? He's making tools. He's making things that are needed. That's what he's doing. And we're not that many generations. We're the 8th generation now from Adam, and they have these skills. Now, we're going to be getting in chapter 5 and understanding how long these people could live. Now, in our day, we would be lucky to live 1/10 of the time frame that they lived on this earth. We would be very lucky to live just a 10th. And I use the word lucky. We would be blessed to live a 10th. But in our lifetimes, people have decades in which they have their careers. It's decades. So that one can begin to perfect their craft in a matter of decades. Starting off just learning and then continuing to learn and continuing to perfect, continue to do better. But, you're looking at 40 years, maybe 50 years, and that's about it for us. Matter of fact, that's stretching it pretty thin there at 50 years, but it is quite possible, depending. But in those days, you had centuries of a career. And someone, unless you were somehow killed and like Cain killed Abel, but Tubal-Cain, with the skill that he got concerning bronze and iron, he would have potentially centuries to perfect this. Centuries. And the same thing concerning Jubal with musical instruments. He would have centuries to perfect this, to make it better and better and better and better. Now, verse 23, then Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. And here's the beauty that's found in the ancients. I want to address this first. This is poetry. This is what he says to his wives. And yeah, he's a polygamist. And here, there is obviously a big enough population at this time. He doesn't name the man he killed. He doesn't name him. There's a big enough population now, and there would be people that you may be familiar with, or you may not even know at all. But he is fearful that he will be avenged because he has killed another man, and of course he has. This is the same Lamech from verse 19, who was the first polygamist, and or at least I think he would have to be the first polygamist because that's why he's listed. I do believe. Now, getting to this point of having killed someone, he knew concerning Cain. He knew concerning Cain. He knew what Cain had done. He's in 7th generation. Cain is 2nd generation. Cain is still around, and Cain would have been known because a lot of people would have been a descendant of Cain, and they would have well known who Cain was and what Cain had done. verse 25. Now we come back to Adam and Eve. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. So this is not their third child. They've had plenty of children. And as we will find out, Seth, Adam is, Adam is 130 years old when he has Seth. From chapter 5, verse 3, Adam is 130 years old when Seth is born. So how old would Eve be? Same age. They're created the same day. They're only hours apart. She's the same age. 130 years. Not too many people live today to that extreme. Extremely few. And those that say they do, I wonder if they've got something wrong. I'm not sure. I can't say too much about it. But today, this would be a rarity that anyone could possibly live that long. But they continue to have children, and they're raising children at 130 years old. Now, we come to verse 26. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then, look at this, then men began to call on the name of the Lord. So they haven't been. Adam and Eve, probably. But I don't know. But Seth did train up. He had to have trained up his child Enosh, or Enosh has done this on his own. But then men began to call on the name of the Lord. They hadn't been doing that. They had not been doing that like they were supposed to have done. So all these that we've been looking at of Enoch and Irad and Lamech and Ada and Jabal and Jubal, they had not been calling on the name of the Lord. They had not been doing it. They were just doing whatever it is that they wanted to do, whatever it was. And were they worshiping something? I think by default they would be. What were they worshiping? Don't know. It doesn't say. It doesn't say at all. But but those days are an extraordinary time. And now we come to chapter 5. Now, we're doing all of this. I'm going to repeat this. We're doing all this to bring us up to the flood and understanding what the world was like prior to the flood. The world was a very different place. And we can just begin reading in the genealogy. And one can ask, what's the use of genealogy? There's a lot of use to it. A lot. And here we can see it. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam in the day that God created man. He made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. You cannot have mankind without male and female. You cannot. We are mankind. That is us. You cannot have a society or a population that goes very long at all without both, because that population will die out. It will not last very long. And one needs the other. Man needs woman, woman needs man. You talk about symbiotic, mutually symbiotic, it is true. And also that of one specifically designed for one side that is necessary for civilization, the other also for what is necessary for civilization. Necessary for the family, not just, yes, marriage, but family and for civilization itself. Both are vital in all of this. Now, we come to this, verse 3, and Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So Adam lives 930 years. That is 10 times longer than we could ever expect to live today. 10 times longer. And that is a long span of life. But he isn't the one who lived the longest in this list. Methuselah will have that distinction, but Methuselah is not in the Bible simply because he's the oldest person to ever live. That's not what it says. He's in the Bible because he's in the genealogy taking us to Noah. And of course from Noah on to Abraham. That's why Methuselah is in it, and that's also why Seth is in this. Seth is in this because he's part of that line. So 930 years and he died. They have exceptionally long lifespans. Why would that be? They are made exactly as we are. There's not a single difference in how they were made, that is flesh, bone, blood, organs, everything that we have, they had. There's nothing special about them except that they lived in a different environment altogether. Completely different environment. How do we know this? We know, and no one will disagree with this, that in the distant past, this earth was different. There are in the Arctic tundra animals and plants buried in the Arctic tundra that should never have been there at all, could not have lived there at all if the Arctic tundra was always Arctic. Couldn't live there at all. Animals and plants that definitely aren't there today, but flourished sometime in the distant past. And no one disagrees with that. And no one who actually knows what they're talking about would disagree. That archaeology done in places such as northern Canada, Alaska, Siberia, those places turn up plants and animals, animal remains, all of it buried, that should not have been there. Should not have been there. That requires temperatures that are considerably more warm. So this earth was warmer in the past. Obviously it was warmer in the past. Considerably warmer. And this whole notion of global warming, well, in talking to someone here, actually it's a number of years ago, a member of the church, who was talking about global warming, I said, how is it that global warming always means devastation? How does it not mean opening up more wheat fields in Canada? How does it not mean more places to grow in places like Siberia? How does it never mean this, but it always means devastation? How does it mean that? And this earth was very warm in the past. Why? Because the earth was different in the past. We will go now to Genesis chapter 1. And we just go to verse 6. Then God said, let there be a firmament. What is that? That's the sky. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made a firmament, that's the sky, and divided the waters which were under the firmament. Well, that's below the sky. All right, I'm used to that. From the waters which are above the firmament. And it was so. So there's water below the sky. Well, I got that one. I've seen lakes and rivers and oceans. That's below the sky. But there's waters, plural, That's above the sky. Well, is that rain? No, that's not rain. Nowhere in the Bible does God refer to clouds as waters. Not once. Something has occurred in the creation. Something that was there, that the way He created the earth. Originally, not only did we have water on the surface, call it where the ocean is, we call it sea level, but there is waters above the sky. Above, not in, it's above the sky. And all of that will come crashing down in the flood, never to return. And that's going to be one major thing that changes life on this earth after the flood as before it. Because that water above the firmament will no longer be there anymore. It will have come down and flooded, part of what flooded the earth. It's not the whole thing, but part of what flooded the earth. And we will continue next week. Once again, just by way of introduction, we're going to be doing this book. It's a book from Apologetics Press, loosely following this. From Apologetics Press, I do recommend it. It's flooded. It concerns the flood, but its effect upon the earth and where the effects can be seen all over. You know, all right, how do you have 2 and 3 miles of solid ice in Antarctica? How does that happen? It's not solid snow, it's ice. How does that happen? Well, there's only one way that I can think of for something like that to happen. Something brought a whole lot of water, and we're talking about way above sea level. And anyway, we will continue next week, and thank you, everybody.